Sorry for kind of interrupting a little early, but we did get behind schedule, and we like to be on schedule. But the good news is the gentleman that's about to speak, Jay Samit, is one of the more entertaining people I've known in my career of producing events. I met Jay way back in my Red Herring days when I was doing a Herring on Hollywood, when there was absolutely no relationship between Silicon Valley and Hollywood. They were just kind of, everybody was sniffing at each other. Of course, Steve Jobs went in and sold them that they should sell all their music for 99 cents a title, which meant that people ended up buying the 3 best songs on an album for $3 instead of the whole album for $13. And then the music industry got very, very mad at us, and Steve. And that's why we all today pay really expensive concert tickets, because they're trying to make up for all that lost money. But that's a side point. Jay Samit was at Universal, Sony, EMI. During that period, he helped companies such as eBay, LinkedIn get started. So he was really at the forefront of the convergence of music and the internet, at the forefront of the convergence of the internet and video. Since then, he's worked in the startup world where he's raised over $800 million for various startups. And now he's just kind of a traveling celebrity, and he also hosts the Wall Street Journal Startup of the Year program. So without further ado, let's give it up for our good friend, Jay Samit. Jay.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm the appetizer to go with your lunch. And there we go. So what I want to talk about today is disruption. Let me do a quick definition of the difference between innovation and disruption as I see the world. So you had the Bronze Age that came out and they figured out how to make a metal sword, okay? Bronze isn't real strong in tensile strength. So swords are about this long. They kept on innovating better metal. You got to iron and steel and longer swords. That's innovation, okay? Fast forward to Indiana Jones in the first movie. The big Arab swordsman's got the big giant sword, and Indy just pulls out the gun and shoots him. That's disruption, okay? So what's going to happen is most of you are going to work at companies that will not be doing what they're doing today, 5 years from now. Most of the jobs that will be being created don't exist today, and your world is getting disrupted faster than you are used to and faster than you are prepared for. Our parents' generation of 20 years, get the gold watch, get the pension, go out, that's gone, okay? And that is going so much faster that most of the world doesn't understand it, and it is impacting not just the things that you think about, companies, but if you're no longer... So, 3 things that are going to change your lives unbelievably. Anybody know what the first one is? That's the plastic that goes into your 3D printer. 3D printers today make anything from buildings to body organs, from steak. Second is mobile. Everybody's talked enough about mobile that you understand how much mobile is changing the world. But the last one, brownie points if you can guess why that's up there. And we'll get to it in a little bit. But the world, no, it's not the world's not getting screwed. So a little bit about my background, because you should always judge the source of the information from who's doing it. I've been an entrepreneur. I've built up large divisions for 3 of the largest media companies, and I've been an entrepreneur, serial, building tons of companies, put the first video on computer, et cetera, et cetera. And what I've seen in my career is it is now easier than ever to start a business. You don't need a room full of racks. Everything's in the cloud. You don't need to buy a lot of software because it's all available on a SaaS basis. You don't need to raise a lot of money because you can share. So when you start putting how fast it is, what you're now seeing is a billionaire in their 20s is not an unheard of thing. There are many, and there will continue to be more of them. So disruption is not necessarily a negative thing. We've always been disrupting. It's just happening faster. So the only difference between disruption and opportunity is your perception. So you can either be part of the change or watch those people that do it. You can either build your dreams or you can work for those people who have dreams and will hire you. So when you look at the shopping center, a bunch of stuff comes to mind. not only were these disruptive businesses in their day, Borders and Blockbuster, but the whole idea of, do we need shopping centers? Do we need office buildings? What does this do to the $11 trillion commercial real estate market in the States? You know, when do you do change? When do you cannibalize your own business? I worked in the 1980s on photo CD for Kodak. In the 1980s, they figured out digital cameras, digital was coming, but they made more money on film than they did on bits. So anybody that was assigned to the digital division was assigned to death, okay? Because it was going to cannibalize. And when I went to the music industry, the same thing. And when I work with studios, the same thing. And the fallacy with disruption is that if you don't do anything, disruption will stop. No, it just means your company will cease to exist because the disruptors will still be coming and changing the way the world works. So business as usual is dead. The ways that got you to the C-suite and the corner office will no longer be there for the next generation. So unless you understand how to decode disruption, how to see what causes change, and more importantly, when there's change, to figure out where can I capture the value. When Sean Fanning and Sean Parker came to see me in my EMI years, they came in with Napster. I knew instantly this is changing the entire game. But Napster didn't capture any value. It unlocked all the value. Everybody could steal music, but it didn't build a business that did anything. Craigslist unlocked the value of classified ads, which you could say, oh my God, people used to have to pay $100 for 2 lines of type buried in the back of the New York Times. Horrible business model, unless you're the New York Times. So it's not just to disrupt, it's how do you disrupt in a way that turns into business. So of the Fortune 500 companies, only 57 of them are still around. And it's only been 50 years. So just because you made it to the zenith doesn't mean the air's any purer up there. It's actually the farther you can fall and the faster. So when you look at the music industry, their best year was exactly the year before their worst year. They went off a cliff in '99. And you're going to see television has fought this model, books have fought this model, and they have different ways of delaying, but it's inevitable. So when you look ahead, in 5 years, the majority of the jobs and the revenues that are going to be created are going to be from things that don't exist today. And when you look at Apple, they're making most of their money from products that couldn't have been imagined a decade ago. And yet their business is changing. And they have the cash reserves to do it. So you either innovate and get acquired, or you stagnate and hope you have the cash to acquire. Those are your two choices. And this is affecting globally. So when you look at all the companies that disappeared from the Great Recession that we just survived, what's most interesting is the top 100 public companies, they're doing fine. But they actually shed 1 million domestic jobs. Those jobs aren't coming back. So unless entrepreneurs create the new jobs, unless disruptors figure it out, we're gone. So back to the 3D printing for a second. Before we get into making things yourselves and disrupting the whole value chain of manufacturing, look at all those items up there. All of those have been blown to bits, literally. Every device that used to employ people, employ factories, ship trucks, cargo, pollute, whatever side of gross commerce you want to take, they've all been replaced by apps. So in your pocket replaces shelves and stores and divisions and everything. When I was one of the senior officers of Sony, I mean, we had a division that just makes clock radios. They were the best clock radio guys on the planet. They really were. You know? I just met the guy who bought the oldest watch company in the world in Switzerland. Really? I don't know about you, but unless you're a banker trying to prove something, why do you wear a watch? You can tell who deals with bankers. But please hire me for your banking conferences. You guys pay a lot. The other thing that's happening is the world's becoming illiterate, but that's not nice to say, so I say post-literate, okay? We've actually gone from a text culture to an image culture. In the past 2 years, more photos have been taken than the first 150 years of photography. Let that sink in for a second. The amount of data that will be created next year is more than all the data that was created up until 2008. We are exponentially increasing. And yes, earlier I heard speakers talk about how most stuff isn't analyzed. You know why? Because by the time you analyze what happened, the world has moved. So what it's really about is, where is disruption going to happen? Where are the greatest opportunities for you to become a billionaire? Because when I say millionaire, there's a whole generation of millennials that are like, you either grew up wanting to be like Michael Jordan, and then you got to high school and you're 5'6", and you go, okay, I'll go to college. But everybody believes today that they will be famous and a billionaire. And it's possible, but not for everybody. So when you really look at what are the biggest trends, and I made this especially small, so only the people that paid for the good seats get the opportunities. I just want to go through some big ones. 3D printing, okay? If you're not paying attention in this space, you're completely asleep. Replacement parts. The whole idea of what the music industry tried to explain about IP is going out the window. Anybody can make any device, any part, anywhere at any time. There are 3D printers that do pharmaceuticals. So you can make any drug for the military in the field. There are organs. There are artificial meats, so you don't have to, kill an animal to eat it. There is metals and fine jewelry and shoes and amazing stuff. Sorry. Then you get into cloud services, which people talked about. Energy storage. The next big revolution is not so much of collecting energy, but of holding on to it. We lose more energy than we use. Let that sink in for a second. Our electric power systems, everything we have is incredibly inefficient. The slightest deviation of efficiency will solve many of the electric grid issues we have today. The Internet of Things. Today there are 6 billion of us on the Internet. In less than 5 years, there will be 50 billion on the Internet. And no, that doesn't mean Lassie and Toto and your goldfish. That means everything in your environment will be talking and giving information to make your life better and to make those brands that I love sell you 24/7. So when you're in a store, it's no longer that we know that you're in Best Buy, it's we know you're in the printer aisle and you're standing in front of that cracked delivery device that HP wants to sell you, and HP can deliver you a coupon to make that free. So LEDs, big data. So the most amazing thing is we can now analyze data and see patterns that we never had available to us before. My favorite example of this was Waze, okay? Cars, without you participating, saying where you are in traffic, what speed you're going, so individual atoms can now reroute themselves so that everybody gets efficiency. Well, put self-driving cars into that, you'll have absolutely the most efficient system in the world, and you'll also unemploy another 20 million people that are employed presently to drive those. So disruption changes jobs, and it changes them at a different, went the wrong way, at a different rate. But the biggest trillions is mobile internet. We now carry in our pocket more powerful processing than the Cray supercomputer that the US Department of Defense wouldn't let outside of the US, okay? We have more power than any of our intercontinental ballistic missiles ever had, or that the space shuttle had. If you want to think about how brave those astronauts were that went up into space, okay, when I was a kid, they had less processing power than a Commodore 64, okay? That's guts. So where is this all taking us? If it's exploding, if it's changing, if we're exponentially growing, and businesses are planning in these arithmetic quarterly cycles of how do I just get my bonus, okay? The first rule of large corporations is not the shareholders, God bless them. It is really self-preservation and how do I get my bonus. And so if you're not motivating people to change, you're not going to change. I have 2 rules when I hire everybody, whether it's in a small company or a big company. The first rule is, first thing I say to every employee is, you don't work for me, I work for you. Your job is to tell me what you need to succeed, and my job is to get it to you or get out of your way. Dead serious. Second rule is, if you work for me for a year and you do not make a mistake, I will fire you. And I'm completely serious about that as well. Because the only way you make change is by not being afraid to make change. You're going to make mistakes, and from those mistakes, you're going to discover everything from penicillin and rubber to Viagra and everything else that's come out from accidents. So we are looking at every form of industry changing. So The 3D printer is estimated to impact 320 million jobs over the next 4 years globally. That is a huge shift. So countries such as China, whose economy has known nothing but growth of the past 15 years, are suddenly going to face with what do you do when you don't have just a manufacturing outsource economy? What do you do when transportation is no longer a major employer? What do you do when the entire supply chain changes? Because you now have the ability to, I don't have to buy that big piece of equipment that stamps a piece of metal. I can send my bits to somebody else that bought that piece of equipment and use it for the 4 hours of the day that they don't. So everything's getting more and more efficient. So you're seeing huge changes in the workforce, which really means lifelong continued learning and education. So distance learning, Khan Academy, all these things aren't for the next generation coming up, because unless you're planning to retire in the next 5 years, you're going to have to reinvent yourself again and again and do autonomous disruption. You're going to have to reimagine who you are and what your skill sets are. I had a lot of peers that thought that they were music guys and marketing guys, and then they looked at themselves differently and they said, wait a second, Coke marketing has it easy. They've been selling the same logo and the same product a million different ways for 100 years. You get to leverage off of that. A music marketing guy has to take 3 kids in a garage and make them famous on Tuesday when the record ships. And they have a different one the next Tuesday, so they can launch projects. So it was no surprise that Jimmy Iovine said, I can take an undifferentiated pair of earbuds and make them as hip as any kids in a garage and turn Beats into a billion-dollar brand. The other thing that's changing is as we're reducing the need for people, we're reducing the middle class. So the great American promise that we thought we were exporting, we exported our diet. I'm amazed how bad the rest of the world now eats. Kudos to us. But we haven't exported our middle class. If anything, it's dwindling here faster than it is in emerging economies. So adapt or die. You have to self-disrupt. And so when we look at Apple, you cannot look at Apple and not say, here's an amazing success, leader of the pack, head of the class. Why are they getting together with IBM? They're getting to IBM for, if you read the stuff in the gold, and I'll read it out loud for those in the cheap seats or those that are post-literate. Over 70% of Apple's revenue and 48% of IBM's revenue comes from products that weren't possible just a couple years ago. So they realize that they have to come out with something new. Every time when Tony's gracious enough to have me here, and I'm thrilled to be here, I make a prediction. I will make a prediction today. Those with the cameras get the shots. Apple's next product, tennis shoes. It's not going to be wearables like this. It's going to be tennis shoes. Why tennis shoes? Plenty of room for storage, and you don't need to plug them in. I'm making electricity right now. Every time my weight goes down, I'm recharging it. So you're going to see them go into tennis shoes. And why? For the very simple reason that tennis shoes are the ultimate consumable. They wear out. So you don't have to upgrade like, oh, do I need the 5.6, the 6.7? Do I need the 7S? Do I need the... No, I need a new pair of shoes. And by the way, my old shoes were really stupid. What's that guy's name again? Anyway, so see if I'm right. Follow me on Twitter. When the shoes come out next year, you'll see. How do I know that I'm right? Look at where they file their patents. It's very easy to predict the future. Hang with the people that are making it. So 85% of the world is now on mobile. And what's happening is smartphones are getting so cheap, sub $20 in the emerging world, that we're all going to have access to this. And they're all going to have access. And so you have a choice, and your kids have a choice. They can watch cats playing on the piano, very addicting, I love it. Or they could actually learn to program, learn skill sets, because it's going to be one workforce competing for all these jobs. Because we're all connected, which means we're all one click away from being a billionaire. And there are billions of us. So you only have to get it right once, for one shining moment, okay? And then your grandkids don't have to work again. Now, is this making any sense? You're very quiet, so either you're enjoying the food or you're lulling yourselves to sleep. So I asked myself, how would Tony Stark compete in the 21st century? And he'd look at the trends that are up there. And again, I made it very difficult for you to read intentionally. because I know you can't. But really what we're talking about is the data's going up, that mobile's connecting us, that it costs 95% less to start a business now than it did a decade ago, and there is more money available to back these things. Because the traditional forms of places to put capital, real estate, we might not need shopping centers, we might not need office buildings. We know we don't need as much consumers. So I helped one of my students start a business this year. It was 4 people in January. It has now crossed 150 million in top line, okay? That's how fast you're able to do a business. But it's in disrupting real estate, in crowdfunding. And here's one of the things that one of the foremost builders in this country said to me. He said, I'm not about building homes anymore. We should have a tremendous shortage of homes from what has happened from 2008 and the recession. And I said, why? And he said something very astute. He said, women are freezing eggs. And I don't mean the ones that he bought, these ones. And they're freezing eggs because they're delaying starting a family. They're not getting out of college, having kids right away, da-da-da-da-da. And they're having a career, and they're waiting, and da-da, which means that they're not racing to the suburbs as fast, which means they don't need a home as fast. They don't need to store as many things as the past. We actually need less homes. This changes the complete landscape. So when you look at where the capital is, 2 ways to predict the future. Where is capital flowing? Because the future isn't free, okay? And second, where is the demographics going? So when we look at it, in the bubble of 2000, LPs were having a tough time. And if you look at the studies of the Kauffman Foundation, it wasn't such a good time from 2000 till about 2 years ago to invest in a venture fund. Turns out now it's one of the best places to put money, and the money is flowing in. So what used to be a very small class of capital, unevenly distributed to this part of the country and the world, getting venture capital in the rest of the world is like finding a unicorn that knows the leprechaun. But the other thing that's happening is banks are being disintermediated. The idea that I put my money in a bank and I get 0 interest and then the bank takes it and lends it out, you can take the bank out. And that governments can control what the value of a currency is, something that we don't understand. Anybody know that the Federal Reserve is not part of the US government? The Federal Reserve is a private corporation and has a private board. Think they're looking out for you? Or their shareholders. So, whether it's Bitcoin or somebody else, you're going to see how money changes. And why is it happening? 25% of Americans are unbanked. Let that sink in. 25% of people are not participating in the system because they don't have the cash to. So, if you just start moving the smallest amount into the crowdfunding market, it suddenly becomes a $300 billion market. That could be equity crowdfunding, that could be novelty crowdfunding, whatever piece. It will start competing globally with other forms of capital. So disruption is not a negative thing. Disruption is the greatest opportunity ever. I will tell you that in my entire 30-year career, nobody ever called me when they were doing well. It hurts. Companies call me when they have a problem. When they have a problem and they're desperate for some change and a new idea, that's when they're open to everybody. And so when you look at the size that the IPOs used to be, IPOs of $200, $400, $800 million, that seemed incredible. Nowadays, your IPOs are in the billions. Airbnb, Uber, really? These are multi-billion companies? Yes, because if they're right and they prove their model, there's 6 billion people that can participate. So 3D printing, it is estimated, not by me, by McKinsey. So they went to all the right schools and then they write a report. They don't have to run any of these companies and make a profit, but they write a report. God bless them. I've sat on enough boards that I had to read those reports. 320 million jobs change. Anybody know what this is a picture of? Show of hands, who had chicken for lunch today? That's who touched it. Okay. So that's how chicken's processed today. I'm not making a value judge. I love chicken. Here's how chicken will be made in the near future. Tastes just like the same tasteless chicken we get today. Same amount of chemicals. We just took out the middle person, the chicken. So you now have you now actually have vegetarian meat. okay? That's like a kosher pig. I mean, and this solves a huge issue. The majority of the world right now gets their protein from one source, and that's fish. Those fish are going bye-bye. We've overfished. 100 years ago in the US, it was illegal to sell a lobster that was under 3 pounds because it was considered not edible for humans, because lobsters were 20 pounds. Ooh, we made all those go away, so now getting a 3-pound lobster is a luxury. So if you haven't seen Soylent Green, it's coming. A fellow professor, so I teach how to build a high-tech startup at USC, and one of the professors down there invented a large-scale 3D printer that instantly just lay down some railroad tracks, and with a gantry and a truck, it will print 3-story apartment buildings. Think after a Katrina, after disaster, third world. Great solution for poverty, but think of how many low-skilled jobs that takes out. So the world is changing in every sector, and the amount of IP traffic is staggering. So when I say it's exploding, and it's exploding geometrically, it's exploding at levels that we can't understand. So the picture of the Internet of Things, so, ooh, I was up here today, I forgot to put water in Fido's bowl. I don't have to remember that because the bowl knows it doesn't have water, and Fido knows that he's thirsty, and it all takes care of itself, okay? So the more items that talk, the more data, the more stuff that can solve problems, just like we solve traffic. And so whether you're doing it for profit or for social change, whether you're trying to change and do an Arab Spring or end global warming, the process of disruption is the same. The steps are the same. Here comes the product pitch. And my book that comes out next year will explain those 4 steps. It's called Disruption Decoded. Follow me on Twitter. So what do we see happening that's the big change? These 2 photos are my absolute favorite photos. The one on the above is a pope gets named in 2005. You're so thrilled to be in the square. I mean, you're absorbing that moment. It's great. 2013, I'm a broadcaster, okay? Everybody's got their phone up. It's not about being there. It's about letting everybody else know that you were there. Nest. Nest is genius, right? Oh, my house will be the perfect temperature. It'll know for my car without me saying anything that I'm so far away. It'll maximize this and that. But it also tells Google how many people are in each room, of which times of the day, what my home habits are. Intel was going to launch that little cable box that knew how many people were on the sofa and what their body temperature was. I wonder why people found that creepy and they shut down the division. But this is what's happening. So if you learn 3 syllables today, that's not too much to ask. It's so, low, and mo. Social, location, and mobile. Combine those 3 things and you've figured out how to address an audience. Because at the end of the day, customer acquisition is the only barrier that you have between you and $1 billion, okay? Now, the drill. The drill, this stat blew my mind. Show of hands, how many people own an electric drill? Okay. I have 3 of them. I don't know why. In the lifetime of you owning that drill will drill for 13 minutes. That's it. I did it. Oh, honey, I don't want to do the whole bookcase. Okay, 13 minutes. That's the life of the product. Why do we own a drill? Why do we own a lawnmower? Why do we have public storage stuff that we don't use enough, but we don't want to get rid of, so we rent more stuff? The idea of a sharing economy isn't Uber of cars. It's the Uber of stuff. Because if we can figure out efficiently, you have a drill, you're not using it, you'll let me use it, I can use it, this or that, oh, you want to use it, we're going to make a lot less stuff, which means we're going to sell a lot less stuff. We're going to make a lot of stuff on demand, so there's no wasted inventory of going and getting last year's stuff half price. It just becomes much more efficient, which means your businesses have to be much more efficient at figuring out what stuff people absolutely need and what stuff they don't need. So sharing economy translates to less consumption, okay? And when you look at it, we're getting back to digital music. What happened to digital music is it turned out people found out they didn't need to own the stuff. Why do you own a song? It's always in the cloud when you want to hear it, so you can get it whenever you want it. Well, with the 3D printer and with sharing economy, why do you own any of your stuff if it's all available anytime? So the peer-to-peer rental market is going to be a $26 billion market, of which there's no established players, okay? You're getting free consulting today. Amazing, okay? Now, how do you know what your thing is? Let's go back to the big data. You no longer have to argue. It should be red. It should be blue. It should come out on Tuesday. It should come out Thursday. I think it needs this feature. Data beats opinion. Check the ego at the door. Data will always be right. It'll never lie to you. I wanted to marry data. I made a mistake. So the more data that we have, it's not just about the numbers. It's the more creativity that you get to bring. So for example, data can tell you my height, my weight, my blood pressure, my temperature, and everything, but it can't tell you that I speak 2 languages, English and sarcasm, okay? The second gets lost on data. So, being smart is knowing the tomato is a fruit. Having knowledge is knowing not to put it in the fruit salad. So, when we look at the sharing economy, right now, our retail food distribution system in the United States, the richest country on earth, throws 40% of all the food that makes it to the supermarket into the trash. It doesn't make it out of the supermarket. Data can solve that. Private cars spend 95% of their time in a driveway. You're going to see a lot less people wanting to own something in the driveway, and you're going to see this creating all the best jobs are going to be things that don't exist today and are available to each and every one of you to be the foremost expert. How many 22-year-old experts in social media have you met? Okay? So, if I leave you with anything, it's to focus on autonomous disruption. The ability to look at yourself, analyze what those strengths are, apply them to these trends, and go out and conquer the world. And I thank you for your time.